Hey guys, and welcome to lesson 11 of our beginner guitar course. And today we're actually going to be talking about chords. What makes a chord? What are the notes that make a chord up? And what we'll be discussing is triads. And we call them a triad because tri is three, and you need three individual notes to make a major or minor chord. Now there are other chords that consist of four notes or, maybe even more than that, but for the most part, triads are what you understand in music as your basic chord structure. So you'll have your first degree of the note, you'll have your third degree of your note, and you'll have your fifth degree of your note. And that's what helps you to hear a major or minor chord. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to the piano, and I'm going to show you just how that looks on piano, because I think, again, it's the easiest way to sort of lay it out and visually understand chords. And then we will talk a bit more about how that works on guitar. So here we are now at our piano, and to understand how chords are built, we need to understand note degrees. And it's the exact same way that we looked at it when we were talking about scales. So let's say we take our C major scale. Our C major scale starts with our 1 is a C, that's our root. And then we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes in the scale, and then the repeat of the 1 or the root again. And the way that we understand chords is built off of the same note degrees that we would look at for a particular scale. So if we're looking at a C major chord, you want to have your root, your third, and your fifth. And that is going to build your C major chord. So you have those three notes, root, third, and fifth, and that is your C major chord. Now, when it comes to chords, a triad, again, is your typical structure for a chord itself. And what distinguishes between a major and a minor chord is actually the third degree of the chord. So, when you're looking at a C major, E is your third degree. If you were to take that note and drop it one half step or one semitone, which is now a E flat, or a D sharp, you now have a C minor chord. So you can hear the difference between those here. Here's your major, and here's your minor. The only thing that's changed is this one note. It went from an E to an E flat. And that's the only thing that you're looking at when it comes to a major versus minor chord, is the difference of this third degree. Now, on piano, when you're playing these chords, you can actually play these notes in any order. So let's say we now take our C note, and we want to play it on the next C up here. We still have an E, a G, and a C. What we call this is an inversion, because we're not playing the traditional style where it's root followed by third followed by the fifth. It is now third followed by fifth and then finally the root. So that is a different inversion of that chord. It's the same thing we talked about on guitar that we would call a voicing, a different voicing. You can do this again by starting with the fifth and then going to the root and then playing the third. That's again just a different inversion on piano of that chord, a different voicing of that chord. But the chord remains the same as far as the notes that make the chord up. So hopefully you can see that no matter what order these notes come in, as long as those three notes are represented in this sound, that you are getting that chord. You can even have multiples of those same notes and it is still the same chord. So let's say we take our C major and we add another C in. That is still a C major even though we're now playing four notes. Let's say we add another E. That is still a C major chord, again, even though we're now playing five notes. Because the notes that we are playing, these two, are just duplicates of these two. So all of those three notes, the notes that make up our C major triad, are still represented here. They're just sometimes multiple times, or in some cases in a different order than we're expecting. But as long as those three notes are there, then that triad still exists. The last thing I want to talk to you about is excluding that third note. If we take it out, it's no longer a triad because a triad consists of 3 notes. That's the tri in triad. But if we have our root and our fifth, that is still a C. We still recognize that to our ears as a C. We just don't know if it's major or minor. So you can play either a major or minor progression over top of that chord and get away with it because there's no distinguishing major or minor in that chord itself. That's what we call a fifth or a 5 chord. So a C5 would be just the C is the root and the fifth, there's excluding the third. So we call it a C5. And that's the same thing that we would refer to on guitar as a power chord because it's no longer minor or major, it is just a C power chord. And we will talk about that in a future lesson for guitar. But just so you're aware, that's what makes the power chord a good option for some guitar playing rhythm tracks because you don't need to know if it's major or minor, it's just a power chord. So the last thing I want to show you is just a quick way to find major or minor chords. Again, my little disclaimer here as always is you should learn the chords as much as you can, memorize as much as you can, because that's going to be more helpful for you down the road. Learn your circle of fifths, know how many sharps and flats are in each key, and what's represented in each chord. But in this case, we're going to just look at a quick way to figure out major or minor chords when we're looking at the piano or even just the musical alphabet. So we're going to start with our root. Again, we'll look at a C major chord. And then we're going to count 4 semitones to get to our third degree. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That is our third in a C chord, a C major chord. Then we're going to count another 3 notes to get to our fifth. 1, 2, and 3. And there is our C major. Now, this works for any major chord. You start with the root, and then you count 4 notes, and then you count 3 notes, and you'll have any major chord that you're looking for. For example, we can start on our G note, and then we can count 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That means B is our third. And then we can count another 3. 1, 2, 3, which makes D our fifth. And that is a G major chord. Now let's say we want to find a minor chord instead. Well, we start with our root again, here's our C, and we count out 3 notes this time, or 3 semitones. 1, 2, 3. That brings us to our D sharp or E flat. And then we count out 4, so we're just reversing what we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is our fifth, once again, a G note. So we have that C minor. Let's look again at our G. We want to figure out a G minor, so what we're going to do now is we're going to count 3 semitones and then 4 semitones. So 1, 2, 3 is our B flat or A sharp, and then we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, which brings us to our D once again, the 5th degree of our G minor chord. And there is your G minor. So that's a little trick just to help you figure out chords quickly or in a pinch, and hopefully you can use that if you need to. But always take the time to try to memorize as much as you can, learn these chords, and commit that to memory. Okay, so hopefully that helps you to understand a little bit better a triad, how chords are built, just the difference between a major or minor depending on that third degree in the chord, and realistically how we can leave that third out, just have our root and our fifth to still get that chord sound, but without that distinguishing factor of major or minor. Now we're going to jump onto the guitar and we're going to talk about how this looks. We've seen how it looks on piano. We want to see how it looks on guitar and how chords are built and how we can even use this to our advantage moving forward. So let's say we take our C chord that we're familiar with. And when you play your C, it's completely open. All 6 of your strings are ringing out, which means we have 6 individual notes, 1 for each string, to play that C chord. What notes are we playing? Well, we know that the C chord is built with our triad of C as our root, our third is our E, and our fifth is our G. So we're looking for those 3 different notes to build a C chord. So let's take a closer look at what we have. Here is our C chord. Our first string, our low E string, has nothing being played on it, which means it's an E note, that's our third. Our A string is our 3rd fret, which is a C note. That is our root. Our D string is the 2nd fret, which is another E. So you can see that these strings, the low E and our D string, now have the same note being played. Okay, those are both E notes, so that's the 3rd again. Let's move to our next string. This is open, and that's a G note, so there's our 5th. Now we move to our B string. Our B string is the 1st fret, which again is a C, so there's another root. And then our thinnest string is our high E, and nothing is being played on that, so it is another E note. So we have E, C, E, G, C, and another E, building that C chord. Those are the 3 notes represented. We've got 3 E's, we've got 2 C's, and we have a G. And there is our C chord. Now how we can use this is we can move anywhere along the neck as long as we know where the notes are to actually build chords. And they don't have to be open chords, we can just play a few notes to get that chord sound. And this is where it's helpful to understand those movable chord shapes that we talked about in our last lesson. Because let's say we look at just playing on our top 3 strings like we talked about with our D chord last time. We're not even going to play the thicker 3 strings, we're just going to play the thinner 3 strings. And what we can do is we can look at our first 3 string notes. We know it's a G, we know we have a B, and we have an E. Well, if you remember our C chord, that's 2 of the notes that we already need to play it. We've already got the G, and we have the E. So all we need now is a C. So if we go to our B string, and we know that that 1st fret is a C, all we have to do is hold that one note down, that 1st fret of our B string, and play the other 2 open. That is a C chord, right? We have all 3 notes of the triad that we need to make a C major. We have a C. And then we can actually start to move that shape if we want to. So again, if we remember what we learned from barring, now we can just take our index finger, lay it across those strings, and keep our 1 finger ahead on the next fret from our bar of the B string. So now we've got, that's a C sharp major. And this of course is our D, which we're familiar with playing in this form, but it's the same thing. And then we can just start moving along the neck and finding whatever notes we need to make up a chord. So by using the techniques we've learned on the piano, we can figure out what the 3 notes are we need for our triads. And then we can say, okay, now let's just find these 3 notes in a close enough area that I can play with my fingers and be able to accomplish that chord wherever we need to on the guitar. In some cases, you may even just be playing around, and I found this on the earlier years of playing guitar, where I would just start playing something and I have no idea what it is, and I'm playing along the neck and I'm like, that sounds cool, but now I can actually apply this knowledge and figure out what I'm actually playing, right? I can sit down and go, okay, here are all the notes that are actually being heard. Now I can try and figure out what chord it is that is being represented here. And I can go back to piano if I want, or I can just do it in my head and actually start to figure out, okay, if these 3 notes are here, then it's going to be this chord. And in some cases you might find this confusing because maybe it's a chord that you just don't know about yet, but oftentimes it'll be a major or minor chord that you can build off of and get that sound for. So, I hope that that's been helpful for you, that this is actually going to help you to unlock a lot more of that fretboard, be able to start to say, okay, you know what, I like the sound of, again, let's say the C chord, but I want to find somewhere else I can play it, maybe make it a little more interesting. Let me move somewhere else on the neck. Or maybe I'm splitting the notes up and I want to be able to play like individual notes. Just to get that every note that I need for a C chord there. But now I can find somewhere else on the neck and actually play that chord as well. So, again, I hope that helps you just to unlock a bit more of the guitar fretboard. It helps you to just push yourself to learn more of those notes and where they're found along the neck. And that it's given you a deeper understanding of chords and how chords are built. So, thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope this has been helpful for you. And don't forget, if you want to just plug in a bit more with this community of guitar players, that you can check out the Discord group that I've started for all of us to be able to communicate together. You can check that out in the description below for a link to that. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And as always, love you guys.